just got the okay sign. So it really is good evening. And wow, what a crowd. What a crowd. Before we start, there are a couple of housekeeping items. You must wear your mask over your nose and over your mouth. That's the only way we can continue this program. It must cover your nose and your mouth. If we have a problem with that, I'm afraid we won't be able to continue. Secondly, please turn off your phones. And that reminds me to do mine. And third, we've had such wonderful programs and such great cooperation. We have a list up here. This is a very inclusive thing. Anyone who feels that he or she would like to, or both, would like to share their story, we have a list here with phone numbers and put your apartment number down too, and I'll contact you. Again, it's each month it is the second and fourth Monday. There's an alternate program on the first and third. So
just the third.
Just the third. Excuse me. There's an alternate program, just the third, which is very interesting, about how we decorate the front of our apartments. So again, looks like most people have their masks on. I hate to have to stop the show. It's kind of interesting because one Monday we went to Colombia, we went to Cuba, we had another time where we heard about being in Germany and going to England, but we haven't heard anything about what we're going to hear tonight. So I know you know Mary Ann, who's hiding under this, as the bag lady, but she has done a transition, right? So forget that, and now we're going to hear Mary Ann's story. It's amazing. Thank you.
I want to say good evening to everyone and thank you for coming. I will start out by giving you the reason why and how we went to Saudi Arabia. It was because of my husband's profession. He wrote a book, The Children of the Kingdom, and that gives a lot of information about the research he did there, bridging genetics and Islam to save the newborns of Saudi Arabia. So I'll give you his background. He was a neuroscientist and the director of the University of Wisconsin Weizmann Center for Developmental Disabilities, one of the largest centers in the world on the research and development of children and it had been, okay, I won't read any more than that. And then I'm going to tell you how he was contacted. His phone rang one morning, and it was a woman called Peggy Johnson. She said she was calling from Los Angeles. I work for an executive search agency, she went on, and I'm calling on behalf of an international client. The purpose of my phone call is to assist this client in his search for a person with your knowledge and skills to participate in a major long-term health research project outside of the United States. Well, Terry thought it was a prank call. He couldn't figure out who this person was and why she was approaching him. And then he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. I'm very happy where I am." Hung up. She called again. "Oh, I'm very sorry, Miss Johnson. I'm not about to leave the University of Wisconsin." Hung up. She called a fourth time, and he said, "The only way I'll listen to you is if you tell me who your client is," which she did. And his response was, "Prince who?" I explained much louder than I intended to. The ears of poor Peggy Johnson. I skidded backwards in my chair. A stack of final exams fell to the floor, and I all but shouted, "You have got to be kidding me!" And then he says, I couldn't wait to tell Marianne, but wanted to see the look on her face that night. So he comes home. "How would you feel about having a pet camel?" he said to me. I stopped and fixed him with a look that said, "All right, Dolan, what are you up to now?" And he opened up his briefcase on the kitchen table and pulled out his notes. And he said, "I'm giving you information from the call. The client Miss Johnson works for," I announced, reading it slowly, "is Prince Sultan bin Salman bin Abdul Aziz of Saudi Arabia." Well, a moment passed and I didn't say anything, and another, and I said, "Wow." I couldn't tell if she was more impressed with the client or the fact that I pronounced his name. "So the project is in Saudi Arabia," I continued. "Yes, I gather that." So that is how it started. This was year 2000. And before I go into him starting his search for a staff, I want to tell you, Terry said he had already been over there for a visit after he had accepted the offer. And he said, "But I want my wife to come over and see it." So we went to Saudi Arabia, and they put us up in the place where we would be living. And Terry went off to work. I mean, he just can't stand it. He has to go to, his office right away, even though we were just visiting. And there was no TV, there was no radio. I paced, I walked outside. I was afraid. I couldn't go outside of the walls of the compound, and I thought, I'm gonna go nuts. I'm gonna go nuts here. So anyway, he would come home and he said, "I only have time for a bite to eat." I said, "I can't stand it here. They're just four walls. You got to get me out of here." So anyway, made it through the visit, and he said, "It'll be better when we move here." I said, okay. And it was much, much better. We arrive at midnight. They take us to our home, and then the decision was, where were we going to live? We were then staying in the diplomatic quarter. So they took us to American compounds. I didn't like them, not at all. They took us to one named Phoenix, didn't like it. And Terry's office was in the diplomatic quarter. I said, "Why don't we just live in the diplomatic quarter?" Because the embassies are there, the consulates are there, people from all over the world live there, there are some government offices. His office, his building was 5 minutes from our house, and okay, let's do that then. It was probably the most interesting place I have ever lived. Now he's putting together his staff, and we are back in the States finalizing things. I had to sell the house. He goes off and does the office. I do the houses, and I do, little things like that. Sell the house. And And so he said, oh, and professionally speaking, he told the prince, I've got to have women on my staff. Well, what do you think? Prince Sultan looked at him. He said, well, I think I can work that out. Terry said, I won't come if I can't have women. Gotta have women. Because the study we are doing is with mothers and babies. I do not want men going out and interviewing the mothers and the babies. I don't want them to have to deal with the men. I want women. Okay. Now he's looking, we're still in the States, and he's looking for a co-director. So he puts the word out. You know, he calls a colleague here, that colleague calls there, he puts out emails, blah, 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 blah. And shortly he receives a call from a friend that says, I think I've got the perfect person for you. Is she a woman? Yes, she is. She is a graduate student about to graduate from Vanderbilt. She's Saudi and she's American. And obviously she speaks Arabic and she speaks English. Oh my God, Terry was so excited. He called her. She thought it was a scam, a prank call. Oh, no, this is not a prank call. And then he remembered what he thought about Miss Johnson when she called. So he was selling her the program, the idea of what he wanted to accomplish. Please, please, please. And finally she agreed that yes, after she graduated, when she went back home in Riyadh, where her parents were, where we were going to live, that she would work with him. But he also had to hire a number of Saudis, some Saudi scientists, and of course some Saudi or Jordanian or Palestinian women for the office. But most of the staff, the men in the offices, you know, in the foyers where they come in, were Saudis. So he had to introduce Heidi El-Alaskari to the staff. He said, good morning, everyone. I've met most of you already, and as you know, I'm an American neuroscientist with a research focus on childhood diseases. And this is why Prince Sultan asked me to come to Saudi Arabia. And it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Heidi El-Alaskari. Her expertise is in children's diseases, and I've learned enough by then he made that announcement, and she translated it into Arabic also, so everybody understood. And he said to himself, I learned enough by this point to make sure everyone understood the title. She was deputy director. The room of attentive-looking men was stony and still. Tough audience. Okay. That's how we got there. And the building he was in had a lovely atrium, open atrium that divided two sections of the building. So the men were on one side and the women were on the other. The women did not wear abayas, they wore white coats, they were in like a clinic situation. That was true of the hospital also. Women did not wear abayas at the hospital. They didn't wear scarves. If they felt uncomfortable with their heads uncovered, they would wear white, tight-fitting headpieces. And so he would have a meeting once a week for his entire staff. He said, I have to have my meeting with all of you. So they would meet in the atrium. Now, the thing of it is, the mutawa, which is called the moral police. What if the moral police sneaks in? So he had a bell or an alarm system installed. The man at the front desk had a buzzer. If the mutawa came in, the man pushed the button, the alarm went off in the atrium, everybody scattered, women over here, men over here. So that was taken care of. The Mutawa never showed up. Yes?
Does everybody know what an abaya is?
An abaya, I'm wearing it. This is an abaya. This is what I wore when I went out and about. Whenever I was in the car, I always made sure I had my abaya on. And I always, especially at night, made sure I had my scarf on. I did not want us to get into any kind of trouble. We were guests in their country, so I acted appropriately. Okay? All right. Now the information I'm going to give you is 20 years old. I can't believe it was 20 years ago. But they don't move fast over there, so it's probably relatively quickly. The king at that time was King Abdullah, a very, very nice and revered man, unlike, well, oh, I won't say it. Okay. I am going to start out, if I may, Ms. Leader, about the city of Riyadh. It was about 3 million. It's much bigger now. The city does not have street signs. You do not have an address. You say, oh, that's Pepsi Road. Go down Pepsi Road because the Pepsi plant was on there. That makes sense. And then you turn at that tree. You know that tree? And then to the left at the bush. You know that bush? Okay, but the drivers were incredible. You know, Terry and I would be invited to dinner clear across the city. And they didn't have, you know, maps or anything. We would just give them a name and a unit number. All the houses had walls around them. And they'd find it. So I don't know how that worked for them. Mail is not delivered to your house. Not that many people there receive mail. And the professionals, their mail would be sent to their offices. So there's no mail, no addresses, no street names, no delivered mail. As far, do you want me to go into shopping? Okay. Grocery shopping. Our driver's name was Yahya. Yahya was a Sudanese, big man. And he felt like he really had to take care of me. It was just, you know, he was my guard. Although sometimes he had a little problem with me. Anyway, he took us to the grocery store. He said, now, I must remind you that when the lights dim and a little bell tinkles, that means it's prayer time. And he said, and then we have 10 minutes and we have to be out. You can stay in the store if you want, but the lights are dimmed and you can't check out or anything. You just wait until prayers are over and they light up everything and you can go out. So so the first time we went shopping, he was pushing the cart and he said, Madame, I think you need this. Boom. He's putting all this stuff in. I had no idea what to do with it, what it was, but I just, you know, acted like I was really appreciative. And a problem he had, women in the United States, unless you're so rich and waited upon, you get out of the car and you grab a bag or two and you take it in, right? Even if your husband's with you. Oh my God. He just could not believe. He opened up the back of the car and I was grabbing things and he just would shake his head. No. So finally I learned to let the man open the car door for me. Let the man close the car door for me. Let the man bring in all the groceries and put them on my counter. So we got that one straightened out. Clothing shopping. They had a women's mall. One of the shopping malls had a women's floor, and the clerks there were Jordanian, young, very good-looking men. and they were the clerks. No Saudis worked in jobs such as that. Was a little below them at that time. They were trying to change it, but I don't know if they have yet or not. And there were no dressing rooms. So my daughter and I were shopping, and she found this dress. We were going to go to a party. She didn't know how it would fit, and so he told her if she would give him one real, she could take it across the hall into the ladies' room, try it on, come back. She's going to keep it, pay the balance. So that's how we tried on dresses.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you went grocery shopping, or in this case, dress shopping, what kind of how was the economy there? I mean, were things more expensive? Or
You know, I didn't really pay attention.
oh, okay.
You need something, you would buy
Buy
it.
it.
They had an endless array of meat. Australian, Irish beef. It just went on and on and on. You know, the big long. There were 2 full long aisles of rice. I have never seen so many different rices. And they had, you know, everything, if not more. You'd have to go to a gourmet store here to find all the things that were available at the Safeway.
I see. So you didn't see any extreme difference. I think in terms of here in the United States, if you go to Hawaii
Mm-hmm.
and you want to buy an apple and you find out that it costs $4,
Mm-hmm.
you say that's kind of expensive. You didn't see any of that there.
You know, I can't remember.
Okay.
And
I think
also,
you would
yeah,
find-
but you've got to remember you're in the Middle East, and they were surrounded by countries that grew lots of fruit.
I see.
They weren't on a barren island, really, because they imported from Jordan and places like that.
I see.
So we had all kinds of fruits that I had never heard of, vegetables I had never heard of. And then, there were no mannequins. I think they have changed that, because that is a depiction of a human. So, but they were so creative and artful in displaying the dresses in the windows. Beautiful, beautiful dresses. And I think this may be the case in some places of the United States. If you wanted a car, you just went to this area where there was car salesman. So you just went for maybe a mile or two, nothing but cars. You wanted TVs, you go over here, TV. So there was you didn't have to drive around to find other dealers. They were all in one area. A lot of shopping at night, because it was so horribly hot during the day. Very, very, well, you all know that, very hot during the day. And I'm going to go back to our villa. The gardener was an Indian man, and his name was Amwar. And he got very upset with me. I'm a gardener, and so I was out we shared him with another couple. I was out in the garden, and he comes around the corner. No, madame, no, the sun, too hot. So I just went into the house, and then he did everything. But what I would do when he wasn't coming, I would do my thing in the garden. Then in the morning, he'd walk on. You could see it. I was out messing in the garden. He would go home, I think, once every 4 years. The labor force there were Filipinos, Bangladeshis, Indians. The Bangladeshis were the bottom of the ladder. The Filipinos did any machine work. women, a lot of Filipino nurses. Also, the top rungs were the Canadian and Irish nurses and doctors and Americans, pay-wise, respect-wise. Also, the little Filipino girls were nannies. And when the American women, when they lived there, of course they had a nanny that they hardly paid, so the nanny would carry the kids, feed the kids, bathe the kids, do everything, and they were quite shocked when they had to come back to the States, and all of a sudden they were back in the real world where they didn't have all those niceties. And then I want to tell you about church. We found, Terry and I, both Catholic, we found out that Mass was in the basement of the American Embassy. We had to call and register, and then the first service was the Methodists, and then the Catholics after that. I'm just going to stand up. I get tired of sitting. So we went to the embassy and checked in at the little stand. They had us on a list. And we go in, and they're just folding chairs and a table up front. And I looked at the couple next to us, and I thought, oh God, she looks like she's from Minnesota. And so we had Mass, and we go outside, and we're walking to the parking lot. We cannot take any nothing printed related to religion when we leave. And so she and I are walking to our cars, and we're visiting, and you always say, and where are you from? And she asked me, and I said, South Dakota. All of a sudden, a voice from a young man behind me said, who said South Dakota? And I said, I did. He said, I'm from South Dakota. I said, oh my God, you are? I mean, there aren't that many people in South Dakota, and I'm thinking half of them are in Saudi Arabia. And so I said, where in South Dakota are you from? He said, Stickney. I said, oh my God, my aunt and uncle live in Stickney. He said, what is their name? I told him. He said, I visit your auntie every time I go back to the States, and I went to school with all of your cousins. That was just so funny. And then the priest comes out. Now the priest is just dressed in regular wear. He has two military guys with him who are in casual wear. And this young man said, come over here, Pete, come over here. We just call the priest Pete. And so he came over, and he said, Pete, where are you from? He said, Wisconsin. Oh my God, Wisconsin. You know, and it just goes on and on like that. That was just so funny. The most moving time in church was Pentecost Sunday. And those of you who are not Christian, Pentecost Sunday is when Pentecost means 50. It's the day that the Holy Ghost comes down to the apostles, and they can speak in tongues. So now they can go out and preach to any or all of the people in their own language. Well, on Pentecost Sunday, but we didn't have services on Sunday because of the Saudi weekend, it was Thursday and Friday. So whatever day that was. So we had people from all over the world attend Mass, and they all stood up and they said one prayer in their native language. That just made the hair on my arms stand up. It was so moving. It was just incredible. The American Embassy did not have an active women's group. Once a week, and I think it was Wednesday, they'd have like what we call happy hour, where the soldiers would come in to the embassy and they could drink beer and there was music, etc., etc. So we like to go to that. The Canadian women of Riyadh were incredible, and Terry and I interacted with Canadians and Irish most of the time. They were our neighbors, and they always had something going. A flamenco dance guest come from outside was invited to the embassy to dance, or they would have an art show where a Canadian artist would be juried into the show, and they had parties. And that was another thing. Terry and I got on. You want to fill it? You have a spot for another guest? The Dolans. Call the Dolans. So we had a very, very full social life, and all of our friends always were having dinner parties, and it was just wonderful. And my friend Glennis Tweed from Canada made the best red wine. The kitchens in our little houses had a guest quarter, maid's quarter, off of the kitchen. Well, nobody used it for maids. The Westerners didn't use it for maids. That's where they brewed. And you could get this wonderful tall jug of grape juice. And then you just buy tubing, and you buy sugar, and I don't know what they all bought to do it. So Terry tried beer, and he thought he had everything. And the young guy at the counter said, "I don't think you have enough tubing." And nobody should know what we're doing in there, but this young man, he knew what was going on. What else did I want to tell you?
Mary Ann, where were your children? Did any of them come over and visit with you?
Only Megan. She was a sophomore in college, and she called her father before we left, and she said, "I want to take the next semester off." And he said, "Why?" She said, "Because I want to come to Saudi Arabia. I'll never have another chance, because you have to be invited to go there." And so we said, "Great." So she came over, and she got into the party mood. She lined up parties, and our friends loved her. It was just wonderful. Also, just to get out of the compound, if somebody was going to buy a loaf of bread, telephone would ring. "I'm going out to buy a loaf of bread. You want to ride along?" "Yes, I want to ride along." So it was always a women's group that was going to buy plants, whatever. And that made it a lot of fun. There were poor people in Saudi Arabia. There were poor areas. They got a monthly stipend. But the job situation was not great for them, simply because so many of them had been Bedouins. What do you do out in the desert? You farm, raise animals, etc., etc. You come to the city, you're not trained in anything. And the younger generation, this was a real problem, because they were used to getting that monthly stipend. Why do they need to work? Yeah, very, very much so. And so they were just starting the process when we were leaving, saying, "Okay, we're going to have to teach you. You have to start working. You have to start working." The education system, again, the children, how do they recognize their mothers? Because a lot of the mothers covered up the shoes. The children would recognize the shoes. And this one couple, they were friends of ours. He was Saudi, she was American. He was rather high up on the hierarchy. And so they sent their children to the Arab school in the morning, and then they had built a lovely small little schoolhouse on their property. They had hired an American teacher, and she taught them in the afternoon. Now, a lot of children went to music lessons, which was on the sly, piano lessons, dance lessons. There were no movies, no plays, no ballets, no concerts, nada. So you can see why the parties were at home. However, the English, they had a group that did fantastic plays, and there was this one woman who sounded just like Patsy Cline, so they had a musical. And it took us ever and a day to find that compound, but we did, and that was a lot of fun. If there was going to be something like that, you were very careful how you put the word out. A lot of us thought that our phones were probably tapped. You never said liquor, alcohol. It was tea or lemonade.
How big was the non-Arab community?
It was large. It was large, simply because of Aramco. So you had all of the employees for Aramco. You had all of the servant or lower class employees. The stores were all maintained, clerked, etc., by Jordanians. So,
The community you were operating in, how many?
oh, in the diplomatic quarter,
Whatever, yeah.
I don't know, honey. It was quite large. It was quite large, but it was like a big park with all the villas and the high walls. It was beautiful. Terry and I would go, and there was you all know what a wadi is? It's a deep gouge in the earth.
The
That was-
riverbed.
Yeah, exactly. Mentioned in the Bible. And so there was a hiking path, so he and I would hike, and I would wear shorts then. And, if I ran into a family that was picnicking, well, I would, sort of bow and scoot. And we were out for our evening walk, and we stopped at this intersection. Now, when I say that the DQ was like a park, it had a lot of green space, which was not common to the general public. They didn't have used to it. So one thing that just was crazy, here you have this 6-lane highway, and then you have, whatever you call that area along the highway, was grassy and green. Families would have picnics out there with 6 lanes of cars flying by. But when they were finished, they could just, their little hibachi. But the Bangladeshis would clean up the next day. So I want to finish the story about Terry and I doing a little walk in the DQ. Why we were just standing at this corner, I don't know. But a lot of times, young women, either brothers or God knows fathers, would bring a carload of young ladies over so they could walk without being hassled. It was a lovely place, etc. So we were standing there, and a young woman from a group across the street comes over and hands me a rose. I looked at it, and I looked at her, and we just, how you have that connection with your eyes. It was the most beautiful gesture, and she just turned around and walked away. That was something I will never forget. Never forget.
Marianne?
Yes.
Do you know if there is a genetics program still going on there?
Yes, there is.
Terry started?
Infant screening, yes, that's still going on under a different direction. Probably not as good as when Terry was
Right,
there.
right. So I can send my grandson there, right?
Yes, of course, of course. He was a workaholic, and that was a challenge to him when we first met there. He was used to getting up in the morning, over to the office, and he'd be the only one there. People just didn't show up that early in the morning, and they just didn't stay that late in the day until finally they caught on. Dr. Dolan doesn't leave. Dr. Dolan is here early in the morning. So, do you remember anything else I should?
Did you mention something about clans?
Oh, About the face covering, yes, absolutely. Face covering is not a rule. It's not an Islamic rule. It's not a state rule. It depends upon your clan, your family, as to how much you cover. There are a lot of women that don't cover their faces at all. But it all depends upon the history of the family. And a lot of families are very, very close. They have a compound, you know, the brother's here, the parents are here, the daughter's here, whatever. So they're very tight-knit families.
Now, what was it like when your 2 years were over and you needed to come home?
Well, I'll have to tell you how my stay ended. We came home for a break, and I had my regular mammogram, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I had my procedure done, and then I needed radiation. And we checked, most of our friends over in Riyadh were physicians at King Faisal. So I checked with them, you know, if it would be a problem for me to have my radiation there. No, they knew the doctors, it would be just fine, no problem. Okay, so it was decided we would go back and I'd have my radiation there. We were packed, the bags were packed in the living room. Terry was over at the Weizmann Center with the scientist from the Middle East giving him a tour of the Weizmann Center. And we were leaving late in the afternoon, and my phone rings. And my daughter Elizabeth said, "Mom, you're not leaving today." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Mom, is your TV on?" And I said, "No." She said, "Turn it on immediately. You are not leaving." It was 9/11. And I think we watched TV nonstop. So it was decided that I would stay, because once you start radiation, you really shouldn't break up the cycle. I would stay and have my radiation in Madison, and just as soon as Terry was allowed to fly, he would go back. So he was allowed to go back in 2 weeks. However, our life changed so much back there. There was just like a sadness. And so we, you know, that I went back, but it just was not the same. So we didn't stay much longer. I have to tell you,
What was Terry actually doing there?
he was starting a newborn baby screening. They had no screening processes for newborns. Testing. When we have a baby here, their little foot's pricked. And they do genetic testing for all kinds of diseases. They didn't have that there. And so they also didn't have a means of doing testing on couples to see whether or not it would be okay for them to marry and not that their babies would be all right. So he set up counseling for couples who were thinking about getting married. And by the way, not all marriages are set up. The girl that we brought back with us sponsored her. Her parents tried to marry her off. She wanted none of it. So a boy and his mother would come to the house, and Afra would say, "I can't cook." The mother would say, "Oh, that's all right. I'm very messy." "Oh, no problem." And Afra would finally say, "I'm not getting married." And she'd walk out of the room. So anyway, we brought her back with us. She wanted to go to college. And so we brought her back, and we made arrangements go to Stevens Point, Wisconsin University, Stevens Point. Now, when she landed, now this is another story, but it is part of our Saudi life. When she landed in Madison, we were driving back to our apartment. We were driving past the lake. She had never seen a lake. So Terry pulled off to a parking area, and she said, "May I get out?" And I said, "Yes, I'll go with you." So we were walking along the water, and she looked at me, she said, "Marianne, may I touch the water?" Well, Marianne cried. I said, "Of course you can touch the water." She had never seen a boat. She had no idea about street signs. So I taught her before, I mean, it was like taking a little child out and about and teaching them about streets, about street signs. How to be careful. She was beautiful. So it was, we set her up at Stevens Point. She was going to stay in this one house, so we were trying to find a place for her to stay. I went into that house, I turned around, I said, "Afra, you are not staying there. It's horrible." Oh, she said, "Good, I was afraid I was going to have to stay there." So we took her back to Madison and tried again to find a place for her to live. She now has a son and lives in Dallas. Wonderful, wonderful person.
I have two questions about your dress. Number one, before, when you were wearing the abaya, your hair was showing.
Mhm.
Would that be allowed?
For me, it was. Yes, unless I ran into a really old, bitchy old lady, and she would be going like this.
And the other, you seem uncomfortable with your scarf. What is that? You're wearing a scarf of some sort?
I'm wearing it. This is what I put around my head. I didn't put it on around my shoulders, but that's what I had to cover my hair. I have to tell you, are we running out of time?
No.
An incident in a shopping mall, and Yahya took Megan and I to a shopping mall, and we had a great time. And the bells went off. I knew it was prayer time, so we were coming down the escalator, headed to the door, and this big group of high school boys were trying to come in. They didn't want to go to prayer time. We were trying to get out. They were trying to come in. So there was a little bit of a tussle. And I didn't have my scarf filled down. Now my dear Yahya was standing off to the side of the sidewalk.
What?
Yahya, the driver, was standing to the side of the sidewalk trying, he was waiting for us to get out of there. So I came out, my scarf was down, my hair was light, and a mutawa, the moral police, "Put your scarf up." I just kept walking. "Put your scarf up." I just kept walking. And Megan is saying, "Mom, put your scarf up." And Yahya is looking at me like, "Please, madam, put your scarf up." Because he can get into trouble if he cannot physically defend me. So finally I put it up, and I was angry.
Did you bring him back?
Did I bring him back? My what, honey? Oh, yeah. No, he had a family in Sudan. No, his family actually was in Riyadh with him. Yeah, no, he wouldn't leave his family. But we bought him a car before we left. Yeah, we did that. So that was the worst, I sort of got in trouble that time.
Do you want to tell
Women
them-
have their own bank.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Women have their own bank. And the old ladies wear the gold. That's their bank. Underneath all of their black. So one time at the souk, now the souk you can buy everything. Bras, panties, gold, big pants, whatever. And she was at the gold souk. You know, there were lots of gold souks. And she was hassling with the young man. He wasn't giving her the money she wanted. She was selling a piece of jewelry. So I think she just moved on down to the next one. But that's the old women from the Bedouin, from the desert.
The book that Terry wrote, on the cover,
Oh, yes.
it has a picture of a little child. You want to tell us the story
Yes.
of that?
The little child on the cover of this book is Heidi Al-Saderi's nephew. He had an in vitro stroke. Never had heard of that before. So one side of his one side of his body was affected. So Terry made arrangements with a host of doctors, New York, Boston, all over, to help this little boy. And now he is doing very, very well. Cute. Of course, we got the permission of the parents to put his picture on this, but that was an unusual thing to have happened. At the souk, you could buy fabric. There were a number of quilters in Riyadh, and I went with a friend. She was from the United States. Her husband was the head of the eye hospital, and actually Terry knew him, so the four of us became better friends. And she was a quilter, and she took me to a quilting exposition one time where women from all over the world brought their quilts for this expo. They were beautiful. But you could buy cotton squares at the souk to quilt. And the quilters were very, very particular. It had to be cotton. Sometimes some of the shops would try and slip something that wasn't cotton. And so they would put the squares on the counter, and my friend would feel, and the old guy would pat her hand, and she said, "You know you're not supposed to touch me." And he would just giggle. He thought that was so funny. One of the old guys trying to be sweet. We had a lot of different things that we could participate in. There would be jewelry shows at somebody's house. Any questions?
You said there was a women's bank.
What, honey?
You said there was a women's bank.
A women's bank, yes.
Was it run by women?
You know, good question. I don't know. And every business, although it may be run by a non-Saudi, a Saudi had to be the head of it, whether he did anything or not. Oh, I have one more story to tell you. Going to my friend Wafa, whose husband was part of the royal family, she had a friend who owned a spa. So this friend was going to have a party at the spa. And the theme was a Chinese tea garden. And I just want you to imagine with me all the black cars pulling in. All the women get out in black abayas and black scarves. They go in, and there's a cloakroom. You take your abaya off, and they give you a chit, just like if you're in a club. But these women are so graceful. I mean, they're whipping their scarf off. They're just whipping their abaya off. Marianne's damn near choking herself with her scarf. Still can't get that one arm out of my abaya. And I never was able to be as graceful as they were in putting it on and taking it off. So we stepped in, the party was in a lower room, and it was decorated to the nines with Chinese decor. The women there were pregnant in every kind of dress, all professions, and I looked down on them and I thought, well, this is just like a ladies' party in Chicago. You know, it was just, they were just having such a good time talking. But I'll have to admit, I thought it looked like a group of Jewish ladies because they all had black hair and looked very pretty and had pretty makeup on and pretty jewelry on. I hope nobody's offended. Anyway, it was a wonderful, wonderful party.
Other questions? Wow, this has been fabulous. I feel like I'm in Saudi Arabia. I mean, I feel like I've been on your shoulder and kind of, you know, watched.
We visited Oman and Dubai. We took Terry to Dubai for his 60th birthday, and in the room was a big bottle of wonderful champagne, which we couldn't take back, and you know, the three of us couldn't possibly drink this big bottle of champagne, so it got recycled to the next person.
You mentioned your daughter who visited you and had this amazing experience. How did this affect her and her decision for her future, her profession?
Her undergraduate degree was in international affairs. Terry and I were very, very fortunate to have people from all over the world as dinner guests at our house. Terry never wanted to take anybody to a restaurant. Oh, come home with me. We'll have such a nice dinner. And yes, we did. And the children sat at the table and dined with us and talked with people from Russia, from all over. So she was very excited about the prospect of going to Riyadh to explore that particular area of the world, because the only way she could go there is if she were invited. And so she got a master's at George Washington University in DC in international affairs. She worked in international education agency where she would review applications from PhD students all over the world who wanted to come to the United States and study. She had a review committee, and then they would decide on who was going to come. So it affected her life, it really affected her life.
Do we have any other questions? This has been amazing, just amazing. No more questions? Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Our trip to Saudi Arabia via
It was lovely telling my story. I have not told it without Terry in a long time. I'm sure he's here someplace.
Yes. And this is being videoed, and so you will have it.
Thank you.
Enjoy again, and your family also.
Thank you.